welcome. I know in a moment that, Tim, you will introduce folks with you, but being in this chamber, I would be remiss if we have many important people here, but particularly in this chamber, we have with us the first Vice Mayor of our city and one of the founders of metropolitan government, Mr. Cate. It is always an honor to have you with us. And us vice mayors have to stick together. So, Tim, if you will introduce those with you, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Stein. I'd like to introduce our Administrative Assistant, Yvonne Ogren, and the Chair of the Metro Historical Commission to my right, Dr. Bill McKee. And with me are members of both the Metro Historical Commission and Metro Historic Zoning Commission, and I'll read their names aloud if you don't mind. Bob Allen, Clay Bailey, Monet Bell, Lula Brooks, Jim Hubler, Lynn Maddox, Councilman Jim Forkham, Don Cusick, Holly Connor, and Vice Mayor George Cate.
Thank you. We are delighted that you are all here. Tim, the initial question is, can you operate within the mayor's proposed budget?
Yes, we can operate within the mayor's proposed budget.
The floor is then yours for any comments about the good work of your commission.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to start by saying how much I and both commissions really appreciate the support that Metro Council has given us over the years. But I do want to read a little bit of a prepared statement. In the past year, the Metro Historical Commission has been proud of its accomplishments. We sponsored our 3rd annual Old House Fair this year and the 33rd annual African American History and Culture Conference with Tennessee State University, both of which had record attendances. We held our 38th annual Preservation Awards program. We approved and installed 5 new historic markers and approved a nomination to the National Register of Historic Places for the Tennessee Supreme Court building. We've completed a historic structures report for Fort Negley with the help of Metro Parks, and we've worked with Dr. Carol Busey, the Davidson County historian, to set up the framework for the Nashville online encyclopedia. We've sponsored more than 24 history programs throughout the year, including our Lunch and Learn series held at the Fort Negley Visitor Center. Working jointly with Metro Parks, we've created a nonprofit group for Fort Negley and completed a master plan and interpretive plan for the reconstruction of Fort Nashborough. We continue to work with Metro agencies to evaluate and protect our county's historic resources, most visibly through the Metro Planning Commission's General Plan Update, Metro Development Housing Agency's Redevelopment District Design Review process, and through capital improvement projects with Metro Parks, General Services, Public Works, and Metro Schools. We also continue to partner with local nonprofits to promote tourism and our city's rich history, architecture, and culture by co-sponsoring events with the Nashville City Cemetery Association, the Tennessee Historical Society, the Nashville Zoo at Grassmere, the Buchanan Log House, Historic Germantown, Friends of Two Rivers Mansion, and Friends of Fort Negley, among others. This happens to be the last year of the Civil War sesquicentennial, and we plan to close it out by co-hosting an event in December to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Nashville, with a week of programs that include lectures, encampments, and demonstrations by Civil War reenactors, and a synchronized firing of cannons from several sites around the city. Again, we're happy with the proposed budget, but our department continues to face challenges due to the lack of staff and funding. And over the last several years, our workload has increased significantly, not only due to the expanded programming of the Metro Historical Commission, but also due to the popularity of historic zoning, a tool that manages growth while protecting our city's architectural character. During this time, the Metro Historical Commission has expanded its role through new projects such as the Nashville Encyclopedia, and the number of properties reviewed by the Metro Historic Zoning Commission have increased by 60%, with the designation of 9 new districts and the expansion of 5. In addition, the number of projects reviewed and permitted has increased by 80%. Although we continue to look for ways to make our process more efficient, the turnaround for review and permitting of work is certainly being impacted by the workload. To close, as always, we continue to look for ways to reduce cost and work more effectively while providing quality service to residents as we work to preserve our history, our neighborhoods, and our significant places. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. In last year's budget, this council added a funding for a position. Can you outline for us how that has improved services and what difference that's made?
It has made a big difference. As you know, especially the council people who have had new overlays or expanded overlays, there have been a number that have gone through this year. I think there are 4 right now in the pipeline that are going to the next Metro Historic Zoning Commission meeting. It does continue to grow because, like the Planning Commission, our city's growing and people are looking for tools to try to manage that growth while protecting the historic character and the architecture in their neighborhood. But it has helped significantly. We actually had to almost put a full stop to expansions. Our department is at the same number we were 7 years ago. And I can tell you during that time, we've expanded greatly. And I think the work of the Metro Historical Commission, their role has expanded in many different directions. So it has definitely helped, absolutely. And it's made a difference.
Councilman Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tim, for all the work you're doing. Just a quick comment. I really appreciate we're working on a couple of conservation overlays for Inglewood. We're just in the very, very beginning stages. Thankfully, we had surveys, so we're a little bit ahead of the game, but appreciate you guys coming out and helping us. I was kind of just thinking the same question that Councilman Stein sort of mentioned, but do you feel like with the person we added last year that person was quickly super busy with the maintenance of all the conservation and historic overlays, and how close are you to needing another person to fill that void as we continue to add overlays, and where are we on that as far as your staffing?
I think we'd be happy with more people now, but I think we could make it through this next budget cycle. But I know to continue, if we're going to continue to grow, we're going to need another staff person this time next year. And
you haven't had to stop expansions yet, though. You said you almost did. And new overlays are still okay, here and there. Obviously, we don't want to overlay everything in the urban core anyway, but we would like the growth we're getting. So, but, a couple here and there are certainly okay.
Yes, we as I said, we have 4 that are going to next month's Metro Historic Zoning Commission. They'll go to planning after that, and they'll go to this body for approval. And they're all large expansions of existing districts. We have a new district also in the pipeline. Actually, we probably have 4 or 5 districts in the pipeline, one for sure that will happen. But beyond that, it's going to be difficult for us to take on much more. That should take us through early next year.
Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I do know what a great job you all do, Tim, and your department. And I guess this question is going to be to Dr. McKee. I was just wondering, and Tim, you could chime in as well. And when you mentioned the Nashville City Cemetery, who handles the upkeep of what goes on there? Because it's pretty maintenance well, and I know that there's still a lot of challenges. So who does handle the upkeep of the Nashville City Cemetery?
The cemetery is administered by really 2 metro departments, Council Lady. The actual physical upkeep, the cutting of the grass, those kinds of things are done by the parks and recreation people. It's still an active cemetery, and so the burials, which they're maybe 1 or 2 a year, maybe I may be over exaggerating that, but that would be handled by the Historical Commission. The Friends Group raises money for the cemetery, the Nashville City Cemetery Association Board, and that does the replacement of tombstones, the actual care of the place, not just the grass cutting and those kinds of things. So there are really 3 entities, two metro entities and a 501c3 that look after the property.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Stein, I had submitted to you, I'm hoping that letter got to you, just a letter of support, just a wish list to be submitted on behalf of the Nashville City Cemetery based on the upkeep, what I submitted to you.
Is that the request for $59,950?
Yeah, it's a wish list.
No, understand, and
Yeah.
I think I have the same letter. I will make
Okay.
sure and we'll provide that to Ms. Waller.
Okay.
It's a request, members of the council, for repairs to the Keeble Building and information kiosk, pruning removals, monument and ironwork repairs, signage and infrastructure repairs, and the request from the Friends of City Cemeteries that be administered through the Historical Commission. Tim, is that, if indeed this were to be funded, is that something that you all can do?
Yes, we'd be happy to do that. We oversaw the renovation project that happened 5 years ago where the city allocated $2.25 million for repairs at the city cemetery. It was the first time money had been allocated in almost 50 years at the site.
Thank you.
May I make a statement?
Yes, sir, please.
Council Lady, the real reason for that request is that if you look at the work that's done at the cemetery, Mayor West was mayor of the city of Nashville when the last, next to last renovation was done there. Then Mayor Purcell did the last one, and Mayor Dean carried that on because it really was in 2 administrations. And what we are trying to do is to not let it get in such bad shape and wait 50 years. It's better to keep it up than try to fix it up, and that's the reason for the request.
Members of the council, I'm going to break for a minute in our usual protocol because Councilman Harrison was also part of that request. Are you on that topic? Okay,
Yes,
please.
thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to advocate a little bit for the cemetery as well. I got involved with the cemetery by visiting a living history tour one year, and I found it not only to be interesting, but to be very, very educational and worthwhile due to the fact that it has so much history about the city of Nashville and some of the founding fathers and some of the people that are buried in the cemetery. And I just think it's the best kept secret in town, and it really shouldn't be a secret at all. It should be wide open. I was amazed to find out some of the people who were buried there, and some of their history has been lost. But the cemetery itself, with volunteers, and none of them are being paid board members. They do a lot of work on weekends, coming out, polishing and washing tombstones, trying to find out names and inscriptions on them to preserve the history of Nashville. So I think this is something worthwhile. I'd really like to see this come to.
We'll add your name to Councilwoman Moore's request.
Thank you.
Councilman Claiborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tim. And I have a question about your funds for the Civil War event. So I'm looking at your fact sheet here, and in the budget year that we are coming to an end, it looks like you had $14,000 for preparation for this event, and you now have $10,000 going forward, which is a reduction, I guess, for printing and some early planning needs that you had. I guess my question is, what impact does not having that $4,000, is that a significant impact to you?
It's not a significant impact. We've budgeted the event in the fall, and we do need to reprint some of the popular Civil War walking tour brochures, the downtown walking tour that the commission created with signage that was done out of a prior allotment of that money as part of it. We do need to reprint that, but I think we can live with the $10,000, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for asking.
Councilman Tigert.
Tim, what are your sources of income? Do you get credit for any of the reviews that you do on zone changes or upgrades to properties and whatnot?
Well, the only revenue we have currently is the Section 106 grant through MDHA. That part of our work we do, we bill and get reimbursed, and it goes to the general fund. It's a maximum of $20,000. We rarely go over $20,000 reimbursement. Used to be 10, they upped it to 20.
But normal citizen reviews of, additions, upgrades, changes, alterations, on all that you're involved in, you're basically doing that just as a charge of the government.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Is there anecdotal evidence of increases in property tax or stabilization of property taxes in areas that have historical overlays versus a contiguous area without a historical overlay?
Dozens of them. Memphis, Chattanooga, and Knoxville have all paid for studies. They've all been done in the last 8 years. They all show that overlays increase property values. People are more willing to invest where there are standards that are a little bit higher than the surrounding area. And there's intrinsic value just in areas that have historic architecture.
So in those areas, is the increase in property tax the only source of revenue for the government, or do any of them charge, for lack of a better term, a surcharge or an oversee charge or something like that to help fund the staff positions that you desperately need?
It is a mixed bag. I would say last time we gave that a look, which was 2 years ago, about half the cities in the country do charge and about half don't.
Do you have a personal opinion of that, or does Dr. McKee or any of?
Well, it's certainly, and I might have mentioned it before, the administration was interested in having us charge a fee. It's something we studied, made a proposal. We actually took it to the Historic Zoning Commission. They signed off on it. It didn't bring in a lot of revenue, but we are open to that, especially if it were tied to an additional staff person.
And what happened to that? It just never,
It never
no sponsor?
happened at the time, the administration. It was right. We were still in the recession, and I think they didn't want to impose any additional fees at that time.
Could you forward that information to us as to your anecdotal studies and whatnot? And,
Absolutely.
And what estimates you have, because as Councilman Davis said, it's my impression that there are more and more areas that are not only seeking but demanding this protection, but how do we then service it in a timely manner if someone needs to alter or renovate their back porch or whatever? A final comment is just a plug for Dr. McKee. If you're a member of a civic organization or a group that's looking for a dynamic, interesting speaker that you'll never know what the story is or what's going to come out of his mouth, this is the gentleman that will keep you spellbound, and I don't want to commit your time and energies, and you need to learn to say no, but this guy does a tremendous job, and we appreciate your service to the city.
Charlie wants 15% of all your fees from now on. Councilwoman Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first of all want to just say thanks, because my district was a beneficiary of the extra the extra staff member that helped us get an overlay passed, and I just came from a historic zoning commission meeting and was just really impressed at the commission and their thoughtfulness and their commitment to upholding the guidelines that are a part of that process. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Could you comment a little on, you mentioned very briefly the encyclopedia, what that involves, and if there are needs that need to be met this year for y'all to deal with that?
It actually is a project that started with the Davidson County historian. Dr. Busey is traveling, is out of town, or she'd be here today. It started as an idea with her. You might be familiar with the Tennessee Encyclopedia that's online. There's a printed version and an online version, and it was her idea to do the same for Davidson County and focus it solely on Davidson County history. Certainly it would be broader than that, but that would be its real focus. That's something we've been working on for 10 months or so. It's in cooperation with ITS and the Downtown Public Library, Director Oliver, and Metro Archives. And it kind of lives in our office. We have 2 staff people that spend time that they have available on it. It's mainly a volunteer effort. There are over, I believe, 150 writers that have volunteered, and there are about 2 to 3 dozen editors in teams of 2. It takes a lot of time to do that. It's going to be very slow moving without additional funding, but it will still continue to move forward. To ask when it might go up, there was a real hope it might go up next year, and it may. Depends on what you call the critical mass of articles to put it up, but certainly it will happen in the next couple of years.
And it's a continuing process, Councilman Allen. It will be added to, it's being done in phases. Phase 1 was the founding of Nashville through the Civil War. Phase 2 is the Civil War. Phase 3 is 1865 to 1920. So it's, and I would invite you to go to the internet and look at the Encyclopedia of Philadelphia. I think that will give you a good focus on the model that we're trying to do, except I think ours is going to be a whole lot better. I'll just share that with you. Sure. I'm a little prejudiced.
Councilman Bedney.
That's me. Question. We just had this building demolished on Music Row, and I understand that the building didn't qualify as a historic building because of what happened. But I was wondering if, because the economy is getting better, thank you to the mayor and the council for good stewardship, but that we are going to see more development happening in the coming years, and that's going to put more structures at risk. And so I was wondering if there is anything that we could do proactively to reach out to developers and talk to them about historic easements and all sort of stuff that could help us deal with issues before they become issues. And I was wondering if that's something that your agency can do if it had adequate personnel to do it. At the same time, I just wanted to see if preserving farms, there's lots of farms in our part of the county, if that's something that your agency can perhaps help us do. Thank you.
To answer the last question first, yes, we do think those historic farms are important, and there's actually a directory of statewide historic century-old farms that's kept through the Center for Historic Preservation at MTSU, and we are looking at those cultural landscapes as a part of identifying properties that are eligible for listing in the National Register. And you mentioned the house at Music Row that SHPO, or the State Historic Preservation Office, decided didn't meet that criteria. We identified those in the community plan updates. We're a part of that when the Planning Commission takes an area, formerly our sub-areas, and goes and has those community meetings. We're a part of that. We go in, we identify historic resources, we take the prior list, we look at it, we see what things have changed, what things might need to be added because they're older and more unique, like the mid-20th century architecture that we're now just starting to realize is important. So we do it in that way, and we certainly can probably do a better job of getting word out about the historic preservation easement program through Historic Nashville, our local Davidson County nonprofit for historic preservation, and through the 20% tax rehabilitation credit for buildings, eligible for buildings that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. We have a brochure that talks about that, and again, anyone can go onto the Planning Commission site and pull up all the historic resources for the county. They're identified.
So I guess the question is, can you use more staff? I mean, you said before yes, but will having more staff will help you be proactive about it?
Well, certainly having more staff helps. Would help anybody, absolutely.
Okay, so I would like to request that we add an additional funding for an additional staff person for them.
Do you have amount?
I don't have an amount.
We need an amount, and that we'll add it to the list, and then we need an amount.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank you, Chair Stein. Look at you smiling, Tim. Love you to death. Thank you so much. I just want to openly compliment you, because we've done historical overlays, we've done conservation overlays, and you and your staff work tirelessly.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that. You really do. I think I even called you on a Sunday one time. Okay, so that's my compliment. And then, so I had 3 questions, and I was hoping maybe you could just explain. I was looking at the personnel status, and it says no minority employees. So if you could just explain why that is. And then I wanted to see if you've been working any with the Suffredale or the stadium in Germantown as it relates to suggestions of what would be appropriate in honoring those persons, whether it was the old teams that played there, whether it was the Negro League, if you could speak to that. And I think the last piece is to explain a little bit more about that music row, because I did get a lot of questions about that as it relates to why it was not preserved.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'll start with the last question. The residential structure, the 2-story brick structure that stood at the corner, I guess, Division and Music Square, east or west there, just off the roundabout. That was a late 1870s house. The only authority we have, unless something is in a historic overlay, either as an individual landmark or as part of a district, the only authority our office has is to hold up demolition for 90 days. It's kind of a cooling off period, so we can meet with the property owners, developers, and look at alternatives, make them aware of the landmark status, the tax credits, the conservation facade easement through historic Nashville, and talk about ways they might incorporate the structure into what development they're doing. And it's just a 90-day stay. That's only permitted if a building is listed or eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places, or if it's a residential structure that's built prior to 1865. And that building didn't qualify for either. We had actually, in the community plan, had determined the building was national. We thought the building was National Register eligible, and the state came out with the developer in November of last year and looked at it because we needed them to agree with us. And honestly, it took them over a month to make a determination. They were very torn. There had been changes. The family that owns it, I believe the 2 women, their father bought the property when they were very young, and he renovated and altered doors, windows. 2/3 of the property was entirely gutted on the inside, and some cornice changes and brick changes, and the State Historic Preservation Office felt they were so significant it didn't qualify in the end, or we would have had the opportunity to do something. I will say we did speak to the developer through that process, and we did get the developer to salvage material in the building that they plan to use in the new construction. We asked them if they might document the building. They did that through architectural drawings and photographs, and because that is very close to what was Fort Houston, the Civil War fort, which essentially kind of stood just off the roundabout, they have offered to let us come on site with the state archaeologist when they begin breaking ground to see if we might uncover anything related back to that era in Fort Houston.
There were other questions. Yes.
What was your first question? I'm sorry.
Yes, and this is a operating question.
I'm sorry, yes. We do have more women than men in the office, but we tend to keep people a long time, as you probably know, and we go through a hiring process, and unfortunately there weren't many minority candidates, which I hate. I think that would be a great contribution to have someone else. I think we did have a few. It just hasn't happened, and I'm sorry about that. I hope that changes.
Okay.
Maybe with a new position.
All right.
What was your third question?
Thank you. And it was the last piece was the Suffredale and working with them in terms of deciding what's of historic significance, some ideas of what can go in there to honor those people, whether we're talking about the Negro League specifically or some of the baseball greats that had played there before. Some kind of monument commemorating.
I
those
think
individuals?
that's a wonderful idea. There hasn't been a lot of discussion with the office about that. More of it was related, working with the state archaeologist and the archaeology firm that the city hired for the excavation, ground preparation for the stadium. But I think that's a wonderful idea, and we'd be happy to work with that group. I think they should be honored there. Certainly, easily, we could put up a historic marker for that with some funding. Of course, everything takes funding, but I think that's an excellent idea. There's some great history there.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Thank you all for being with us. Ms. Kennard, we'll start with Farmers Market in just a moment. Thank you all.